Welcome everyone to my end of the year recap. We're doing a fun list today. We're going to be going over the top 10 worst movies of 2024. Now, there were a lot of stinkers this year. A lot of them are fun movies. Some of them are boring. We're ranking them just how worse, the worse they are, the top of the list you get. Some of them are, fun, bad movies I had a lot of fun with but sucked. Some of them are just straight boring. We'll get to that and explain which ones those are. I wanted to do a top 10 list. I was deciding between doing top 15, top 20, but I think top 10 is the best way to go. We're going to break down the top 10 worst movies of 2024, give a bunch of honorable mentions as well, but I want to just kick off the list and get right off the bat with number 10, which is Red One. Red One was a movie that I think we all knew was going to suck, hence why it's number 10 on the list. It is fun at parts, but it is the worst type of movie Hollywood could put out. It's an amalgamation of just all of the tropes that, Hollywood thinks is entertaining. There's action, there's comedy, but it's really nothing because it's trying to combine so many different elements into one movie. It's a holiday movie, yet I don't think any family this year or next year or any year are going to sit down and think, what movie I want to watch on Amazon? That Red One Christmas movie. Let's watch that for Christmas, which should be the goal, right? It's a Christmas family movie, but it's just not entertaining, not memorable, and extremely bland. It really has nothing to say. I didn't love it. I saw it in IMAX, and I thought it was very empty. I forgot about it immediately after. It's extremely convoluted. It is also not a movie that I think will be remembered for any other reason. Aside from being a Christmas movie, it's just a really boring, very simple story that no one's going to care about or remember. It adds nothing. It says nothing. That's why Red One is my number 10 worst movie of the year. Now, coming up, number 9 is from Blumhouse. It is Imaginary. Now, this movie I thought was really, really stupid. It was fun stupid. This was one I enjoyed a little more than Red One. Really cliche. Honestly, there are probably other films that could take this spot, but I think it was extremely forgotten, especially the fact that John Krasinski movie If was coming out soon after this, I think like a month after, and everyone kind of forgot about Imaginary. I thought this movie was ridiculous, though. It was absolutely ridiculous. It had some really cool concepts, but it just totally wasted them. There are some really creepy imagery in here, some creepy ideas, but it's just so flat, so stupid, so just laughable, and everything is really a cliche. The characters are cliches. They're all just... This feels like a movie that could have come out in the 90s or the early 2000s. It's insane that this is a 2024 movie just because of how baseline nothing it is. I just wanted to put Imaginary out there because a lot of people seem to forget about that movie. I just thought it was fun, but definitely a terrible movie. Really, the ending also is ridiculous. But again, there's some cool concepts in there. Just what a waste of time. My number 8 worst movie of the year is Borderlands. Borderlands was a movie we all knew was going to flop. It was absolutely awful in every way. And also, this movie had been built up for so long. There were strikes. There were times before the strike where this movie was supposed to come out where it didn't. There were no images released. It just was a disaster. This movie is one of those films where it all boils down to the script. It's a really bad adaptation of a video game series, and it just says nothing new. It's not fun to look at. It's the worst thing in a movie is where, you have nothing good to look at, no good story. You have great actors who clearly are totally miscast. Director Eli Roth is not really in his wheelhouse. He's known for making horror movies. He was not the man to make this movie. At least, not the man to make a really passionate story. I didn't think he was so passionate about this. And also the story was just not great. And great actors can't save themselves when the story or the characters they're playing, they're not really right for the role. What was Kevin Hart doing in this movie? Anyway, that is the 8th worst movie of the year. Coming in at number 7 on my worst movies of the year is Tarot. I really hated Tarot. This was another movie that just has all the sins that, I can't ignore in bad horror movies. It's boring. None of the characters are memorable. It was just such a stupid, empty movie. I saw Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes immediately after this film. And I really thought Tarot, I just don't really remember anything about it, but I remember distinctly hating this movie. It's just super random. I think that's the idea here. These characters find themselves playing with these tarot cards and they're being cursed by them, but there's no build-up, there's no stakes, there's no backstory, or at least anything, beyond something spoken briefly to set that up. It's just so cliche and so forgettable. It's one of the worst movies of the year, and I absolutely hated it. Now we're cracking into the top 6, and so far we've done a lot of big movies, blockbusters. This next one is blockbuster. I saw it in IMAX, one of the worst IMAX experiences I've seen. It was The Crow, the Bill Skarsgård remake, which just had no business existing. This is a broken movie right from the beginning. No one asked for a Crow remake or reboot. The only movie from the Crow series that ever did great was the first Crow movie with Brandon Lee that, never should have been touched after he died making that movie. And even besides that fact that, it's a movie we should respect, the actor passed away making the film. But aside from that, there's just nothing to really do with the story, and I don't think anyone's really asking for a Crow reboot. This movie is just awful. None of the characters work. None of the bad guys have any motivation. How Bill Skarsgård and his girlfriend, is played by F.K. Twigs, meet and fall in love is just so rushed. There's no connection between them. I think they really did try to build that up. I mean, they take time with it, but none of it ever feels justified, especially the world of this movie. It's such a mess where characters can come back to life and, he tries to avenge her from the afterlife. It's just such a stupid revenge flick that never feels real or grounded at all. And I absolutely hated this movie. And it's one I wanted to watch. I saw it in IMAX. The action scenes are terrible. They set them to classical music like in an opera house. It's just so boring, not worth your time at all. Number 5 on my worst movies of the year is Argyle. Argyle is a movie that was originally meant to go to Apple TV. This was one of the first movies I reviewed this year. I was immediately suspicious. This movie had a red flag from the start, with only one trailer ever being released for it. Companion, they kind of learned. That movie had one trailer. It comes out in a couple days, but now they just released another trailer. And every time a movie only has one trailer, I think they're hiding something. This can't be that great. Argyle is just such a mess. It's extremely convoluted. The plot is ridiculous. There are no stakes. The final battle hinges on them getting some drive. Samuel L. Jackson's watching a Lakers game. There's a final battle on ice skating on petroleum. It honestly sounds like it could be kind of random fun, but for this movie to be this big spy blockbuster, it came out in February, appropriately, it's just so nothing. It has such a convoluted story. I really wanted to like Argyle. This movie was a big deal for me, honestly, for a while, because I was very excited for it. I was thinking of getting tickets to see this in IMAX. I ended up just seeing it in regular format. It was just such a nothing movie, so misleading. Everything, you want from big action movies, which this movie promises to be, it just is not. It feels like a direct-to-video movie, which it was supposed to be. And it's just a mess. It's everything you expect from this movie you don't really get, and that's why it's my number 5 worst movie of the year. Number 4 is Afraid. This was absolutely, wait till we get to the rest of the list. This was one of the worst horror movies of this year. It was so terrible. I was so bored by this movie. I had no idea what the director was trying to say. He wrote and directed this. There's no score. There's no horror. There is so much this movie is also trying to say about how AI manipulates us, how it turns us against each other, but it's so boring. It is just honestly one of the most just shocking movies that came out this year. It honestly should be higher on the list, but the other movies are just worse. This was seriously one of the most mind-bogglingly bad movies this year. I not only can't believe it's a Blumhouse release, but just that it was a big horror movie release. It doesn't feel like a horror movie, more like a subtle tech thriller that could be a bad episode of some procedural show. It's so short. It's 85 minutes. It's so confusing because there's so many plot twists. And I thought this was just going to be a smart house movie, where they get some AI tool, like that Simpsons Treehouse of Horror where they have the Pierce Brosnan AI in their house and it kind of spies on them and falls in love with Marge. I thought we were getting something like that. This is so boring. It's one of the most boring horror movies of the year. not even, it's scary. It's just shockingly bad and boring. I absolutely hated Afraid. It was terrible. So moving on to my number 3 worst movie of the year. Probably a lot of you expected this, Madam Web. And I will tell you right now, this is the only Sony Marvel movie on this list, even though we had Craven and Venom. Madam Web just represents the worst of everything about those movies. I really thought Venom 3 was less well-crafted. They were both not well-crafted. Craven is not going to be on this list, but Craven I give the benefit of the doubt because the director, J.C. Shandor, did a really good job with what he had. He's great at lighting and making his scenes great. I thought the editing in the movie was pretty bad, but the way he holds shots, he really tried, and you could tell. Madam Web looks awful. The cast is just... I really don't want to rip on the actors because I do like a lot of the actors, but it just, nothing works, and it's such a fun, bad movie. It really is a great time at the movies. I saw this in IMAX too, and it's so unbelievable just at how the story makes no sense. Cassie, played by Dakota Johnson, literally kidnaps 3 girls, drives them to the forest, abandons them there. Then they go to a diner, they dance to Britney Spears, they get rescued. Most of the stuff that happens in the movie just happens because people say, I need to do this. The main guy's trying to find 3 girls because he has this CIA person who tracks them, and he's I have a vision that they're going to kill me in the future. I must stop them. It's honestly so terrible from a story point of view. Venom also fails in that way. That movie's all just exposition. But I mean, Madam Web is just insanely poorly done. It feels like it was the first time everyone was doing the first time, writing it, directing it. I think it actually was the director's first feature. The final battle is this girl skateboarding on the Pepsi Cola sign. It's just so unbelievably nothing. Very fun to watch in IMAX. I honestly was laughing. I was smiling because of how stupid it was and how big, the movie was. I mean, I was seeing it on a huge screen, and it was just the worst, one of the worst films I've seen this year. So that's number 3. Number 2, before we get to our honorable mentions, is another horror movie. I thought this was, honestly, I put Afraid, as number 4. Afraid might be more boring, but this movie's also just so shocking. Number 2 is The Strangers, Chapter 1. This movie was a big deal for me. I saw this. It was one of my first summer blockbusters in May. I was just shocked by this movie. It was so stupid, so slow. Nothing of consequence seems to happen. It's mostly just these characters. That's another thing. Like Madam Web, this is Madam Web of horror, where nothing seems to happen, unless the plot obviously needs it to. It's so stupid. It's so drawn out. This movie is just 3 people chasing 2 people around a house. And there's so many moments where you think they could get away, they could get out, but then something happens and they drag it out. It just shouldn't be a movie. This is IP, because The Strangers is a popular franchise being drawn out. It's just so stupid. I absolutely hated The Strangers Chapter 1. And the way it sets up the 2 sequels, which are coming out, there's a Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 filmed. I just think this is one of those worst examples, even worse than Red 1, even, more so than The Crow or Argyle, of a movie franchise being milked just because the previous movies make money. And it's just so boring. I actively was hating this movie. I was commenting the whole time. No one was in the theater. I don't think I bothered anyone. I was talking to my friend, and we were just riffing on it, saying, this is unbelievable. I can't believe people actually like that movie. But anyway, that was my second worst movie of the year. I want to go over the honorable mentions because there are a lot of them before I get to my number 1 pick. So let's go through the honorable mentions. I want to put in my honorable mentions Longlegs. Again, a lot of people liked Longlegs. You can all fight me on that. I just thought it was very disappointing. The marketing for that was amazing. It was just a disappointing, really slow movie. Wasn't scary. I was very confused as to what the payoff for Longlegs himself was. Just feels like a lot of exposition, a lot of very pretty imagery, but the story was not much. That was not really one of the worst movies of the year. I just have to get that out. The Front Room. I didn't like that movie. Absolution. Blitz, the Steve McQueen movie. Not one of the worst of the year, but just so anonymous for him. I really didn't know what they were trying to say. It was kind of a period film. It was kind of trying to be a war film, trying to be a film about family. It was so many different things. It just felt kind of meh, overall. Immaculate, I did not like. That was really stupid. Night Swim, Roadhouse, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and honorable mentions, the last ones are Stream, really boring. I hate to say that because that movie was super small. It was made by the same small studio who made Terrifier 3, but I thought Stream was very disappointing. Joker 2 will not be on the top 10 worst movies of the year. I thought it was really stupid, but it wasn't, top 10 worst. It was just so boring. We're going to reevaluate that movie years from now. I just think it was so anticlimactic, so boring. You know where it's going. It's a courtroom thriller, but the Joker, it's just such a bizarre premise, not entertaining, extremely anticlimactic, and boring. And my last two honorable mentions for worst movie of the year would be the Garfield movie and Founders Day. Founders Day was absolutely unwatchable. It has 5 plot twists. I saw this movie this was the first movie of 2024 I watched. I saw it New Year's Day. It was a mystery movie, and I really thought it would be The Beekeeper, which was a much better movie, but it was Founders Day. And the Garfield movie is just absolutely terrible. It was just so boring. And for a Garfield movie, it wasn't even about Garfield. It was about him and his dad. It was just not great at all. There are much better kids' movies. The Wild Robot, for example, much, much better. I thought Moana 2 was also absolutely garbage, but I'm not going to put that on this list. I thought Garfield 2, honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, Moana 2, I thought was honestly more boring than the Garfield movie. But let's get into my worst movie of the year. I think a lot of people knew this one was coming. Megalopolis by Francis Ford Coppola. I'd been excited for this movie since 2020 when it was first really announced that, he had this movie he wanted to make. I was so excited for that movie. It came out and it was just garbage. The worst thing about it is, well, let's look at it in a retrospective type of way. Francis Ford Coppola wanted to make this movie forever. He financed it himself. No studio wanted to touch it. I respect him for wanting to make something and, saying when everyone else said no, he still did it. But there's just no audience for this movie, which is really, honestly, I totally understand that. It's a movie with so many different genres, so many different characters, all who really have no purpose. Aubrey Plaza's in here. I don't know for what reason. Giancarlo Esposito, who's more memorable in The Boys season 4, which is saying something. And Adam Driver plays this architect who can stop time for some reason that never even really comes into play. It's such an interesting concept about rebuilding a city, which the city doesn't even get destroyed till an hour and a half minutes off screen by a satellite crash. And then on top of that, the whole movie they're debating, well, should we, rebuild the city? Should we keep the city as is? And then the city just gets destroyed and they do it anyway. There's just so many questions I had watching this. And the big issue, I guess, would be, well, I want to see Megalopolis. I want to see the city, but you never even get to see the city except in some images at the end that look really bad, that look like Spy Kids visuals, the effects. It's just so boring. I really was excited for this movie. It has this big Oscar baity vibe to it. It's just a mess. It's really boring, which is, one of the worst things about it, and not worth watching. Obviously, there was a ton of hype because it's Francis Ford Coppola, who's made Apocalypse Now, The Godfather Part 2, Bram Stoker's Dracula, which, again, I even said I liked the ending of that a little more than Nosferatu, which is the same story. He just tried to make a movie that has no business existing in 2024. It feels like a movie from 30 years ago. Even then, it would still be terrible. It's just so bad. I really hated Megalopolis. It was one of those movies that, you thought would be cool. It has all these cool concepts, but none of them go anywhere. What is Shia LaBeouf doing? He's the closest thing this movie has to a villain. He doesn't really do anything. He's leading this revolt. Aubrey Plaza is in it. You have Jon Voight. Dustin Hoffman dies. Not off screen. They show his death so briefly. I wouldn't even put a spoiler. It's that bad. But let me know what you guys think, honestly, of Megalopolis. If you think of my list, let me know what you think of the top 10 worst movies of the year. I appreciate everyone watching this video, clicking on it, taking the time to watch it. Thank you so much. Leave a comment, and subscribe if you like it. I'll make sure to reply. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you guys on the next video. And for now, take care.